So if you're just joining us, you have found the right place. You are at Earthly Matters, an artist talk with artist Neha Choksi and curator Kristina Newhouse, in conversation with Neha speaking about her new exhibition that is online through our website at the Caroline Campagna Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum. So we're going to start right now at 6:02. And go over just some information you might find helpful, and then how tonight's going to run. So welcome, my name's Kristina Allegria. I'm curator of education at the Caroline Campagna Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum at Cal State Long Beach. We are honored to be presenting Earthly Matters. Artist Neha Choksi and curator Kristina Newhouse in conversation in association with our current online exhibition, Uncertain Allies. Our plan for tonight is that artist Neha Choksi will present a short presentation that talks about the current exhibition and also about what led up to it. And then Kristina and Neha, Kristina, who's the curator of the exhibition, will join in a conversation. At the end of that conversation, we will open up to questions. And really, anytime you have a question, you may send it to us in the chat and we will track them. And after the conversation portion is done, we will present them to the artist and the curator for discussion. If you are students from a class and you need to get proof of attendance, please, towards the end of the presentation, send me your name, your class number, and your professor so that I can document it, and we will send the information to your professor. I would also like to introduce at this time our co-host, Amanda Fruta, and she is our Public Affairs and Communications Specialist at the museum. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I wanted to let everyone know that this event is being recorded. By continuing to be here with us, you are consenting to be recorded. This session recording will also be posted on the public YouTube page called Kleefeld Contemporary. So anyone who wasn't able to come can view it in the future. And I will let Chris continue. Thank you.
Okay, great. Before we get started, we would like to give an ongoing recognition to the First Peoples whose land our institution is placed upon. We acknowledge that we are on the land of Tongva, Gabrieleño, and the Hahachaman, Wahenyo nations, who have lived and continue to live on the land where our museum and the campus is located. We recognize the Tongva Hahachaman nations and their spiritual connection as the first stewards and the traditional caretakers of this land. We thank them for their strength, their perseverance, and their resistance. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Kristina Newhouse, who is the curator of exhibitions at the Kleefeld Contemporary Art Museum. Kristina is someone I've known a long time. I'm really happy to be introducing her. She coordinated many exhibitions at our museum and has a longstanding career. In 2020, she coordinated the TBM Design and Artist Yalu to present Smartbox, an architectural design prototype that will reside on our campus for 2 years, where it will collect data for a revolutionary sustainable window shade system known as Invert. And it is on our campus now. If you have a class and you're allowed to be there, please go find it. It's amazing. Smartbox installation is currently on view, and we look forward to sharing more information and events with you as the campus opens up. This past year, Kristina curated an exhibition at Angels Gate Cultural Center called Raised as Roosters, with relief prints, paintings, and drawings by Abel Alejandre and Guerrera. Guerra, excuse me, I said that wrong. Newhouse has curated numerous exhibitions, with the highlight for me being David Lamalas, A Life of Their Own, which she co-curated with Maria Jose Herrera for the Getty 2017 PST LA initiative. Newhouse also served for a number of years as editor for Extra Contemporary Arts Quarterly, producing numerous reviews, essays for the magazine. Her most recent writing for Extra was a 2020 review of the influential filmmaker and artist Susan Mogul. It was titled A Feminist Survival Index. I look forward to the intelligent and innovative exhibitions Kristina will conjure up in the future and as our museum opens in 2022. Please welcome Kristina Newhouse.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Chris. And I just want to say, I'm going to issue a little bit of a disclaimer. I have a St. Bernard. She's hot tonight, and I have a very tiny place. So if you hear huffing, just know that is the source, and I apologize in advance. I can't shut it off with her. That said, I wanted to welcome Neha Choksi. I've known Neha for a very long time. We became close working together at Extra. I've always been a tremendous admirer of her work. Her work has always been, to me, very poetic, powerful, and thoughtful. And we've been planning this exhibition for quite a time. There have been a few delays and snags. Most recently with COVID, we were supposed to have the exhibition take place in a space in Long Beach. And due to COVID restrictions, we had to pivot to this online presentation. Neha has handled all of these challenges with calm grace and strength. And we had a lot of changes that needed to be made, and I appreciate everything that she's done to make this possible. So thank you, Neha, for joining us tonight and for doing this exhibition with us. So what we're going to start tonight, you are able to see the exhibition online at Neha's website, nehachoksi.com. I encourage you after this conversation to take a closer look at things and also poke around a little bit. She's got some amazing projects, other projects that you can see at her website. But we've got a lot of questions that we wanted to cover tonight, so we're just going to jump right in. Hi, Neha. First, we're going to start out, we're going to talk about your sculpture, The Weight of the Caves. Amanda, if you can switch over to that, there we go. We're starting with The Weight of the Caves, and I just have a question for you, because I know that figuratively and literally, this work informed the paintings that we're also going to see a little bit more of later in the talk. How so? What was the beginning like for these works?
Yeah, they kind of, The Weight of the Cave, and actually some work before that too, all led up to making these paintings that you'll see later on that are canvas, muslin, linen, in 3D shapes along with rocks embedded in them. Can we have the next 3 slides slowly? And is it maximized on the screen? Like it looks the wrong.
There we go.
Yeah, so as you can note, I mean, it's a large work with 11 boulders, small boulders, and there are holes cored out from the surface with a drill, like you would drill into the earth, and handprints painted on relief atop the boulders. The paint was actually made from crushing the rock rubble extracted from each boulder. Next slide. And next, please. Here you can see that you can see some of the crushed stone from another series of stone sculptures. I was making the pigment by crushing rock with rock or rock with mallet, but I was always wrapping the rock to be broken down into like 2 or 3 layers of cloth or towel. Next slide. And then I started experimenting with the towels that were already rags, too many holes in them. Next slide. I even just, the images still look too small, Amanda, but I even just draped the images, the fabrics. And next slide. And to make Weight of the Cave, I was also thinking about the cave painting with hands, just to give you a sort of, I was thinking about the rocks, but I was also thinking about this. It was a way of saying, I'm here, I'm making a mark. I'm saying I exist, I matter, we matter together. But it is also more primal and playful than all that. Next slide. So this is one of those pieces. In my head, I've fancifully decided that the source for the rocks and stones in my work are all the empty caves and quarries. It is as if they rolled out of Plato's cave to prove Plato wrong. And Plato was an idealist, which matters to me because I'm a materialist. And yes, that was a reference to the Platonic allegory of the cave. Next slide. I'm going to be going back a bit to look at if you saw those bits of rock that were black earlier, they came from the series Blank Invitation sculptures. Next slide. Here's an installation of them at Frieze in 2016. And next 4 slides, please. You can slowly cycle through. Making these led me to both making the Weight of the Cave sculptural installation. You can keep cycling. And also making these led me to the paintings. And here's how I can say that it led me to the paintings. If you see this rock, you can stop there. There's a notch in them, and then there's a piece of linen coming out, which has painted on it the Rimrock granite sculpture's extract. They're both sitting on a brass sheet, that's why I could bend it. But if you take this, this is one way of thinking about painting for me. I was like, oh, on a scalar shift, you have pigment, but you also have this big rock. They're both sitting on a substrate of linen and brass. But now I can do a scalar shift. So next slide, please. So now I'm making a scalar shift where all of this is on some MDF or wood board, and the rock is tiny, and the evidence of the rock acting on the cloth is the larger piece of the painting. Next slide, please. And that's the actual work. Amanda, you might have to refresh and make it larger, the whole thing, for the next thing, but we can stop here. Yeah, so that's kind of how I was thinking and how I made my way to these wall works that are in Uncertain Allies, the exhibition at Kleefeld.
Great, thanks Neha. So canvas, linen, and terry cloth towels at the most basic level represent culture. The making of woven fabrics was an important human discovery and became an important industry. Were you thinking at all about culture when you decided to work with fabric in your paintings?
I guess I'm getting distracted by the image showing at the bottom, but I guess I was thinking about artistic culture intertwined with the care of the body when I was incorporating fabric into these works. Cloth both protects us as well as projects our idea of us in art and painting. And I want the viewer to feel some sense of fragility and tenderness in the works, thinking about cloth as being able to wrap a body. So the next slide, please. In the second batch of. So I hope sometimes that the cloth and the artwork allows one to think that there's something corporeal and vulnerable about the works. Next slide. I think you're somehow not on the right slides, Amanda. You need to refresh and start over for the second batch. There we go. So this is the image that should be about the cloth and the artworks that makes one think about corporeal and vulnerable. The next slide, you can stop here. This is an initial test sketch. This is where I started thinking about grids in relationship to the cloth. It came from thinking about the weave of the cloth. So this is kind of where the woven fabric became important, but it also was about the grids that we impose on the landscape. The next 4 slides, Amanda, please, but slowly. I was thinking both about the weave enlarged. Next slide, yeah. And about grids as an abstraction that maps territory, among other things. You can see it played out in this piece, Lattice. And you can also see it in the next piece called Trial Lines. You can play the next 6 slides, Amanda. So Kristina, what's up next?
So we've talked about bodily ministrations and the personal intimacy associated with towels and cleaning cloths in conversations that you and I have shared. When we contemplate these pieces, is there anything that can be inferred from the absence of the human body in these paintings? Because the outcome of the human activity is there, but the figure is absent.
Next slide, and then the next slide, because this is still Trial Lines, and then the next slide, please. This is a work that's not in the exhibition, but it feels very bodily, which is why I included it. And the towels and the muslin are absolutely invoking the body and care and cover and tenderness. But the body is metonomically also in these works. Those fabrics intimate the body without needing the body in the work. And the body is very much there in your presence, meaning the viewer standing in front of it. But when you bring up this idea of absence and presence, I guess I am kind of thinking about how it's not really polar opposites. In Jain philosophy, which is the religion of my parents, which I kind of refer to, there's a central principle called anekantvad. This is the theory of many-sidedness of reality and truth. And the law of anekantvad affirms that there is no opposition between the unity of being and the plurality of the aspects of being. So reality, according to Jains, as other traditions also have it, is permanent in the midst of changes. So I kind of wanted to get that into the work. So the presence and absence is a good point, but it leads me to something that's both there and not there.
Yeah. So you've also pointed to a work in this show, Earth Arrow, Uncertain Allies, that has not been marred through the process of reducing stone to rubble and from rubble to dust, which is then made into pigment.
Amanda, can you have the next slide?
You've said that Earth Arrow contains the promise of movement. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, this is one of those pieces, and you can cycle through the next 2 slides and stop there. Neither the canvas nor the towel are marred, but the rock at the very bottom holds the potential to mar or degenerate itself, crumble itself, or to provide something. So it's that sort of movement, either as a tool or as a material. And I guess I kind of want to think about the event of the potential embedded in the potential of an event happening. And the painter Grace Hartigan hated second-handedness, and she once explained, one of the most difficult of things is not to have the painting be a depiction of the event, but the event itself. I guess I'm trying to get to that sense of energy and event into the works. And the idea of the event is tied to this. I've recently started thinking more about ontology and ontogeny, and I'm really interested in the emphasis on ontogeny that I hope the work has. And allow me to paraphrase from Tim Ingold's book, Correspondences, where he is talking about the sort of needed shift from being to becoming, which philosophers would characterize as a shift from ontology to ontogeny. So ontology is what it takes for a thing to exist, but ontogeny is about how it is generated, about its growth and formation, hence the event. As he says, this shift has important ethical implications, and I'm quoting now, for it suggests that things are far from closed to one another, each wrapped up in its own ultimately impenetrable world of being. But on the contrary, things are fundamentally open and all participate in this indivisible world of becoming. So multiple ontologies signify multiple worlds, but multiple ontogenies signify one world. And I guess, yeah, in their growth and movement, the things of this world respond to one another, and it's a burden that we all must carry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So many of the wall works that we've seen tonight contain a rock. How should we think about the presence of this material? Do we think of rock as an ally, as a witness? Is it us?
I think it is all of the above. I'll explain. I guess I think of the presence of this material as a struggle for existence on our own terms. And, it's a witness to time that, as Hugh Raffles has said in his book, The Unconformities, which is also about sort of gaps in geological time being present in the rock layers. He says that time is immeasurably deep and inexplicably shallow, both perpetual deferral and instantaneous turmoil. But the stone is more than a mere witness to the past for me. It is also, as Jeffrey Jerome Cohen wrote about in his book Stone, he's a medievalist, but he wrote about stone, that time is actively and materially contained in stone. Time exists in a plural state. It's like an ebullient then crashing against a vivacious now, as he put it, shaping the futures to arrive. The human and the geologic are likewise compound, dynamic, full of heterogeneity. So going back to the ethics of ontogeny, it's like the stony presence in these wall works implies an interdependence in a single world of becoming. Could we go through the next three images? No, next three images. This is Blank Invitation. Next one will be The Weight of the Cave. And the next one is Behind the Door from Uncertain Allies. Or no, it's actually another piece. But I just kind of wanted to talk about stone as both substance and material, as well as object in all three of these pieces. Mm-hmm. There's matter and there's force, the force that geological time embraces and the force that I'm applying as a human being. And I'm also thinking of the rock in the wall works as like a piece of the earth, a piece of the planet displaced into the realm of culture forcibly. So in accordance with Anikantvad that I mentioned before, the contradictory explanations of a thing are correct from their respective points of view. So I guess this material, this rock, is ally, mm-hmm. witness, and us.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So the artist, Egil Sabjørnsen, asked political theorist and philosopher Jane Bennett, this is his question: given that everything on Earth comes out of magma, or that living creatures descend from inanimate materials, are humans walking and talking stones? To this, Bennett answered in the affirmative. Do you agree with them?
Yes, short answer. Mm-hmm. a longer one or slightly more expanded version would be, it is really the only relationships have to rock, a corporeal one where we are, related to the earth, we come out of earth, we go back to earth. And it's the only relationship that we have without the intervention of brute force, machinery, extraction economies, without those coming into play.
Right. So recently you observed that the presence of stone is not only a marker of what actually is made, the marks or where the pigment might have come from. Rather, you have begun to think of it as an actual literal piece of the planet. As you've said, physically, somebody made a hole in the planet for me to have this rock. When you said that, it really sunk in to me what you were thinking about. What do you or any of us owe the stone, if anything, for this sacrifice?
Yeah, it is. It's something that's coming from the planet. It is a piece of the planet, and I owe it, as an artist, transformation into culture, something that persists in a different register than the given, something that is made, that is in the human realm. Next set of images, and the next slide, please. Yeah, this is great. So each granite boulder here is okay, hold it there. Each granite boulder is a planet unto itself. Like I was thinking of that with the poured holes representing the mining, pouring, and the handprints, which are actually my handprints, one negative and one positive, are actually placed where I would hold it to lift it or hold onto it or move it around, depending on how heavy it is. Those are the handprints that represent the transformation for human use. And the hole in the earth is this permanent loss. The hole in the stone is a permanent loss. Mm-hmm. And in a similar way, this is the next slide. I made a series of frottage works about this permanent loss at a quarry. Next slide. This installation shows you on the two flanking sides of the exhibit, the 8 frottage works. They're stacked one on top of each other. Next 4 slides while I'm talking. So I went to this disused quarry in Riverside, and I took 2 large sheets and I made frottage rubbings of the mountain face that was, clean and disused. And I then cut them up into pieces as if to imply like the presence of the stone that went out into the world. You could probably stop there. Or actually the next one too. The pieces of stone that went out are akin to the pieces of absences that I've represented by this frottage that are then going out into the world. It's kind of this idea of the phantom limb that Kristina Newhouse had earlier brought up when she was thinking about this work. And it's kind of where I was thinking about, yeah, physically somebody made a hole in the planet for me to have that rock, or for me to have the absence of that rock, which is what these frottage works are talking about.
Great. In light of the fact that humans are walking and talking stones, and you are also talking about stones at the planetary level, how do you think about Dust to Mountain, the video that you made in 2016, which accompanies the frottage and the Blackstone sculptures, the blank invitation that you spoke about just a minute ago?
Next slide, please. I'll just show the install again. Next slide. So if you notice, yes, there are the blank invitations, those rock sculptures on the floor. There's the frottage on the left and right. But that curtain, and there's a monitor at the back left. If you'd show the next slide, please. That's actually the video work that Kristina's talking about, Dust to Mountain. Next slide, please. And we will now, so the video installation is both the curtain and the monitor that is angled at the angle of my kicking. We're gonna play 2 short excerpts from the video components next. So that first one is somewhat from the beginning, but it's not exactly the very beginning, but I'm like essentially kicking dust and then gravel. And then I go up the scale all the way up to a mountain, but this is the second excerpt from somewhere in the middle. So yeah, if you're thinking about, you asked me like, how do you think about dust and mountain on a planetary level? I guess I'm both of the earth, going after what Jane Bennett and said that, yes, we are magma, we're walking stones. So I'm both of the earth and I'm challenging the earth in this piece. I'm absurdly trying to enlarge the dust to a mountain rather than grinding it down. And there are several stories that are associated with this work, which you can find online if you go to my website. But essentially the work explores the contestation between philosophical idealism and materialism. It's like obdurate stone meeting fleshy human. What you need to know here is that this work is animated by this interplay between the body's playfulness and gross temptations and the refined mental calculus that you need to counter violence. I mean, it comes down to my Jane upbringing. I was told not to kick rocks, so here we have it. Yeah, I mean, I could talk more about the idealism and materialism if we have time, Kristina.
Okay. Well, why don't we keep going?
Yes.
Related to the idea of control, from the same conversation with the artist, Sebjörnsson, with Jane Bennett, Bennett observed about the making of a painting, when different combinations of materialities engage with each other, the oil, the artist's body, the canvas, the movements and sounds of each, etc., the agency is distributed across the assemblage that forms. No one element is in control, or if it is, it does not reign for long. I don't know if the oil exerts more or less power over the resultant work of art than the artist does. It's probably impossible to discern exactly the distribution of agency at work in any given instance, but it seems most reasonable to identify the collective, the assemblage, as the real locus of agency, rather than any individuated element therein. What is the agency of the stone, the extracted minerals that make up the pigment, the cloth, the wooden armatures, and uncertain allies? And I will say, I apologize for the agency of my other little dog who is scratching his bed right now. If you were hearing that noise, he's his own creature as well. So what is the agency of the stone, Neha? The extracted minerals that make up the pigment, the cloth, the armatures in this work?
It has little control over its physical placement because I have forced it into that space. But Howard has so much power in each piece. It controls both the meaning of the piece as well as the pigment in the piece. The idea that it's coming from the earth. And the mutuality, the mutual relationship between the fabric, the frame, the stone, they seem supportive of each other in some strange way. And I guess I didn't talk about this earlier, but we have sort of two extraction economies at work in each of these pieces in a way. We have agriculture and mining and quarrying. They both are sort of our way of living off the earth. And agriculture leads us to the cloth in a way. It makes the fabric possible. The mining and the quarrying gives us the stone, which gives me the pigments that are now spread up on these paintings. So I guess the agency of the stone is complex and definitely distributed and powerful in its ability to give meaning.
Great. So as an aside to everybody who's in the conversation, I know that Neha and I are talking about several different texts, and we can provide the bibliographic references for that. If you have an interest, we can email that to you at another time. And leading into that, I'm going to talk about another passage in Tim Ingold's book, Correspondences. Neha and I have been reading this book together. She gave me a copy, and it's really quite moving if you have a chance to read it. He has an essay that's called A Stone's Life, and in it he poignantly traces in first person the experience of a particular stone from a temple in Sicily at the ancient site of Selenite, I think is how you would say it. It's not an easy story. Ingold talks about the extraction early on, and this is what he has to say. I was delivered in a quarry. It was not an easy birth. They had to hack me out. There were men, many men, who came with metal tools. First, they drew a circle some 2 meters in diameter. Then they chiseled down along the line to make a groove of equal depth. Undercutting from all around the base of the groove, they finally broke through, brought in levers to haul me up, wrapped me in a great wooden drum, and rolled me over land behind a team of oxen to where they were building. So the stone ensures many manifestations, but in the end, the stone understands at the end of this piece by Ingold that it will endure beyond human intention. In reading this, I can't help but draw comparisons to the violence of the thrown stones in the video that we'll be seeing next, Charge. For this, you decided to intercut the sequences of stone being thrown with still images of, among other things, ancient cultural sites, scientific discoveries, historic artworks from many world traditions, award-winning photographs of natural events and phenomena, architecture, contemporary artworks, and references to your own previous work. Each of these interjections signifies conscious human interventions onto the earth, whether additive or subtractive. What are you thinking about stone here?
I guess I'm thinking about stone as both matter and force.
Mhm.
And I guess the 2 clips that we will play will kind of work some way towards understanding that. This entire video is on the exhibition website on my webpage until I believe April 22nd or April 30th, sorry, and then it'll be pulled off. So if you want to see the entire video, you can go there. But here are 2 clips. So that was the forward movement of the arm. So your question was, how do I think about stone here? And also thinking about the fact that stone understands that it will endure beyond human intention.
Mhm.
Can we stick to the last screen image of Charge? Oh, it's gone. Okay, all right. So yes, stone is both matter and force, but it's also like I'm thinking about the identity and perception of the rock itself, its own being, the substance and the process of change, about the eye, the camera, and the body, and the viewer's presence is implied in the edit, and it is important to the meaning of Charge. And I'm also thinking about rock, as I mentioned earlier, as a piece of the earth, a piece of the planet, displaced into the realm of culture forcibly. So the human activity releases the rock, which is like, I mean, rock from the planet to give us a rock. And it is, when it is in the earth, it's simply embedded mass, but our labors convert the rock from mass into surface, exposing it to gravity and air, even if it's just sitting on the earth. But I really exposed it to gravity and air in this piece by launching it up. It's actually all of my friends in Bombay and in Los Angeles who volunteered their labor to throw those rocks at the camera. And I mean, you know, Christina, you had months ago shared with me this passage from Schopenhauer where he's quoting Spinoza about the inclination for things to persist in their own being. And it was striking because it says, this is the quotation, Spinoza says that if a stone which has been projected through the air had consciousness, it would believe that it was moving of its own free will. I add this only, that the stone would be right. The impulse given it is for the stone what the motive is for me. And what in the case of the stone appears as cohesion, gravitation, rigidity is in its inner nature the same as that which I recognize in myself as will. And what the stone also, if knowledge were given to it, would recognize as will. Now he's writing many centuries ago, but I think knowledge is given to it. Yeah, so charge has this forward momentum with cultural things that we create, human beings create. And then the reverse section is with flowers and sunsets. Both have a specific history of where they were sourced from and why. And the website has an entire list of every single image used in the video. It's in a PDF.
Great. Well, we're getting close to the time where we'll be entertaining some questions from audience, but I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't more that you wanted to share about the Jain doctrine of many-sidedness. And then, you know, if you wanted to talk a little bit about change, because I know that's important to you as well.
Yeah, I guess I think of transformation and change and multiple points of view as actually different facets of the same thing, because a material changes form or changes its scale or its substantial effect, but it's still the same material, but it's also changed. And it's kind of like anekantvad, which is a postulation of non-one-sidedness, acknowledges multiple viewpoints. And so combining the two thoughts helps me think about both absence and presence as coexisting simultaneously in an object. And it also helps me appreciate the sort of finitude and ultimate meaningless and insignificance of human existence, which Dusty Mountain is also kind of referring to. The last thing I will add in the last sort of minute or so, and maybe you can just cycle through the images, these images while I'm talking, it hardly matters. They're from two projects, Faith and Friction and Elementary. And the bit about stones is actually a larger project. It's part of a larger project. And this is all incipient work. So I was asking three questions. Who am I? Which I answered in this piece, Faith and Friction, that I am my friends and family. And we all gathered at this 225-acre construction site for a Jain ashram from Bombay, from abroad. Everybody came through and made this piece happen. And the second question I was asking is not who am I, but who are we culturally, for which I attended elementary school as a kindergartner for an entire year, and I'm still working on that project. I was supposed to be in the same elementary school, it's a LAUSD school, this year as a artist in residence, but I didn't quite make it for obvious reasons. And the third part of the project is who are we as a species, as we engage with these extractive technologies to become human. And this is sort of an incipient start. There's all of these last 5 years of thinking about rock is just one small part of thinking about mining and agriculture. So this is an image from elementary, but we can stop here. Or you can keep going. Okay, we're good to go with questions and answers, please.
Hi, thank you so much. That was so fascinating. So we now open the chat to questions, and I have a couple to start us right off. The first question is from Ashwini Bhatt to the panelists. He said, do you see this as a form of conversation between inanimate and animate matter? Your foot communicating with the stone, that stone which falls off and hits the other stone is continuing that connection with a question mark.
Yes and no. I mean, I think of everything as following Jane Bennett as matter. So whether the matter is inanimate or animate, it still comes down to matter. It's just a matter of punning. It's just a matter of it's a matter of like how matter interacts with each other, the relationships that they engender in each other, the forces and valences and vectors that each enforce on each other while remaining in their own realm, but also the interdependencies of everything. Yeah, Ashwini, that's a good question, but yeah, I'm more interested in interdependency, which actually Faith and Friction is also about. The piece that asked, who am I?
Great answer. Okay, another question for you. This is from Elaine, A-L-A-I-N, not Elaine, Elaine. Given that allies associate or unite with a common purpose, would you please tell us more about the uncertainty between allies? What is our common purpose given the violence you have discussed between rock and human? What a great question.
Thanks, Elaine. The uncertainty is comes from our civilizational force of so many human beings, so many cultures, and so many ways of thinking about addressing the Earth's sort of what we consider inanimate matter as our allies. And when there's so much violence enacted, how can we draw them into allyship? How can they, in fact, actually draw us into allyship? And I guess that's where I was like uncertain about which way the scales tip. And hence I titled the exhibition Uncertain Allies. Any further follow-up, Alain?
No more from Elaine yet. Okay. Any other questions? I don't have any more questions in here. Let's see what else. Keep them coming, please.
I'm happy to take questions about almost anything.
Yeah.
Actually, while we're waiting for some questions, there's a marvelous show and tell that's happening in the background. On kind of screen right, you can see a couple of works that are in the Uncertain Allies exhibition, but there are some other marvelous objects that are off to screen left. And those are newer works, and they're part of the evolution of ideas that have happened. While everybody's been looking and admiring, can you talk a little bit about how these things have evolved since you've made the work for us?
This piece right behind me, which has 7 panels, 7 straps, 7 bolsters, and 7 steel bands that are exactly the width of the canvas straps that go from the stone back to the canvas. They're about, I think they're about 2 feet. Yeah, 2.5 feet. And it's called, now I have to remember the title, Strata Bouquet, Uncertain Allies. And I guess COLA, which is the City of Los Angeles' fellowship, will be publishing a catalog on that work and on the other works of other fellows. And Anna Iwataki has written a fantastic essay about this work. And yeah, I actually extracted cores from each of these 7 boulders, crush them into pigment to mix up this idea, which kind of refers back to uncertain allies in such a way that, to Elaine's question. I mixed it with actually some other pigments as well to approximate what I thought might be a good color for that rock. So both of those are mixed in, and they're kind of embedding different geographies. These rocks all came from different places. They're, you know, sandstone, volcanic rock, igneous rocks, they granite, they go all over and come from all over, and they obviously have different geological timescales built into it. And it would be impossible to have this as it is in one place in one time. And it kind of was referring to sort of Dutch flower arrangements, or the paintings of flower arrangements, where impossible flowers that bloom at different times and in different seasons and different places will be brought together in a painting. So that's why it's called strata bouquet. The work on the bottom right is not finished, but it is a block of marble, and it has a core missing, big core, and there's multiple other cores, but I think they will end up being hoping it'll be glass with the rubble that I've taken out. There's actually 3 of them, but you can only see one.
That's fascinating. If you even just think of how glass is made and how that will play into that, it's super
Yes.
fascinating. We have a great question from Carmen Argate. She says, "Hi Neha, I'm curious about your thoughts regarding change and transformation. Material can change form, yet transformation seems to extend farther, not limited to the materiality of it. Is transformation in art contained within the human knowing, or is it the rock, or is it the action?" Super great question.
Transformation in art versus transformation in our regular sort of being on Earth. I guess I should talk more about the transformation in art. And it's kind of the blending or the coexistence of, in this particular case, the rock's natural material tendencies and my intellectually absorbed ideas that are then pushed out into this vector of force to create a further transformation, to accelerate the transformation in some way. So it's human knowing, the rock, and the action. And we're coming right back to Anekantrad. But in sort of ancient Indian philosophy, if you notice, there are a lot of cores, holes, absences. I'm kind of working with that. And they have a sort of neat way of parsing absence. And I'm going to explain 4 things. It might be hard to follow, but it's 4. There's prior absence, so the ground before the plant grew. Destructional absence, the ground after the tree is cut down. Absolute absence, which is a sort of impossibility because it's absolute, which would be a singing, dancing tree. And a mutual absence, where the tree is not the boulder and the boulder is not the tree. If you apply this to how I'm thinking about art and the rocks, it kind of parses in the same way and thinking about absence and materiality. Does that help, Carmen? And if anyone who's interested in where I'm bringing this ontology from, it's the late Nyaya Vaisheshika, for those who might be Indian out there.
Okay, Elaine, that was super. Elaine has a follow-up, and you remember Elaine was talking about the uncertainty of allies. He says, given the uncertainty between humans and rock on our planet because of our violence, what implications are there for how we should relate to rock that is not from our planet?
Yeah, especially all those metallic stone tools that were made by the Inuit from fallen meteorites? It's a great question. I think all of it, the entire universe, the entire cosmos deserves our compassion and our ability to relate to it on its own terms, even if we fashion it into tools for use. And funnily enough, Jains believe that there is life on other planets, and the cosmos is very huge and large, and that there are other planets out there with different lifespans for the life that's on it. We may not even recognize it. We may not have the tools to recognize life in other places. And they also believe that time is expansive and it's infinite in the past and infinite in the future. And material is just recycled. Very physics-based in a way. So what are the implications for how we should relate to rock that is not from our planet? The same goddamn way.
Good answer. Great. Anyone else have questions? I have questions that probably take it another direction, being a person in education at the museum. More in your practice overall. You know, the more I learn about your practice, Neha, the more deeply it touches me. And it's often very painful and deeply seated, and it makes me question just everything in the everyday. I wonder if you could just talk a little about being an artist, what drives you, how you deal with working things out. You know, we can see kind of in your studio there how you're working, trying things out. Talk a little about maybe success and failure so that budding artists might have some inspiration from you as an artist.
Initially, I had a lot of failure, and I really hit my stride probably in, I want to say 2004-ish, so like early 30s, like I was 31. But once I started making a series of works that are called the Trilogy on Absenting, which I started in 2007, which you can find on my website. I sort of, they're performance-based work, and a lot of my work is based on performance or an embedded history of performance or an implied performance. It got a lot easier for me to think through things, and I started trusting myself. I also trust myself enough to show works that I'm not completely sure about. I'm not one of those artists that's absolutely like, I have to show something that's perfect. I actually learn from putting things out in the world that are not perfect, and then I go back to them. So the Weight of the Cave actually had another earlier phase, which I didn't like particularly. So I went back and upraised the handprints, polished the interior better, and grouped them together as a single work. And it works better for me because there's more meaning there, and I have ways of explaining that. So yeah, I guess we're out of time though. But
Right.
we
are, but I'm going to make another plug for Neha. You actually can see the Weight of the Cave in person. It's at various small fires, a gallery in Los Angeles. I believe you can just simply make an appointment, and it's definitely worth seeing in person if you have a chance to do that.
You don't have to necessarily make an appointment to see that. You only need to make an appointment to go inside the gallery.
Got it.
Artist from Trinidad who's half Indian and half Black is showing his paintings. And the Very Small Fires runs through May 22nd.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and one more thing to share before we wrap up. We wanted to thank our funders for the exhibition at Pasadena Art Alliance and the Cal State Long Beach associated instructionally related the CSULB IRA. So thank you for providing funding.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Neha and Kristina, for really a deep, wonderful discussion and all your work on it. And be sure to visit our website, and then you can link directly to Neha's website and see the exhibition. And stay in touch and see what is happening. We're getting ready for our new reopening in 2022. Woohoo. So excited. So thank you all for coming. Have a really great night.